I think everyone is here now. I would like to welcome you very warmly during this session, the second day of WEBCON Day. My name is Martyna Krzyżak, and together with Marek Suchowiejko, we will be conducting this presentation. We work at the implementation department, and the topic of this presentation is the portal privileges, views, reports, and new opportunities of WEBCON BPS 2019 for end users. This is our agenda for today. First, we'll talk about the portal and applications. Then we'll go through the changes and privileges. And then we'll move on to reports, both from the designer and from the level of the portal. We will present to you information on how to create private views and public views, and talk about dashboards. And finally, we will also list all improvements for end users that will be part of BPS 2019. Maybe some housekeeping information. Because we have quite a lot of live demos, the presentation will be shown on the TV screen, and our demo will be seen on the projectors overhead.
To może spróbujemy na jednym?
Ewentualnie prosilibyśmy Państwa może
Okay, I think only one overhead projector is working, so maybe people on that side of the room, if you could sit closer to the overhead projector.
Dziękujemy bardzo i przepraszamy za tę niedogodność.
Thank you very much and sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, moving to the beginning of our presentation. What is new in 2019 version is the portal. The portal consists of many applications, and applications are added to the portal automatically after you add it in Studio. Each application is made up of at least one process, but there can be more than one. It's important that the processes can be directly defined in the application, but there could also be linked processes that are linked to the application whose definition is in a different application, but because we want to show some reports from that application, then this process can be linked to a different application. In our presentation, I can show you the so-called secretariat and for handling incoming and outgoing mail. One process could be outgoing emails. We can define it in the secretariat application, but we can link it also with the HR application or a different application that we select. Another good example is the consultation process that can be used in many different applications. If we want to add reports to different applications, then we have to link it in Studio to those applications. Yet another example is an invoice. We define it in the application called accounting, but usually the invoices are started in the so-called reception. So to the application called reception, we link this process. Let me briefly show you what the portal looks like. You've seen it already, but it's good to see it again to remind the most important elements. On the very top, we have the task counter, then the most often used applications. We'll talk about it later. Below, we have all available applications, only those that we have access to. On the left-hand side, we have the quick access panel with my tasks, for example. On the right-hand side, in the top right corner, there is a search field if we go to a specific application. Here we have a very standard view. You cannot configure it, at least at this point. It is not possible to change it. On the very top, the main side of the application has a description and a task counter on the right-hand side. Here on the right you have the information about the application owner and contact details for this person. On the very top we have a search engine. I'll tell you more about it because it's an interesting part of the system. Underneath the description we have tiles to launch process parts. Those tiles are not added here automatically. It's not that you'll see tiles immediately for each element. We define them. By default, we'll only have this element where you can choose which form type and which process you want to start. But if you want to have direct tiles to start certain element, we need to define it. Interpreters can't hear if somebody is not using the microphone. But the answer was yes. Underneath those tiles we have suggested views. From this level we can move to specific dashboards, public and private views. Underneath the suggested views we have the latest activity in application. So we can see what we have done on specific documents in the application and also the activities of other users if we have access to those. On the left-hand side we have a menu with the most important parts of the application. My tasks, just like on the main landing page of the portal. Underneath the anomalies, suggested, observed, that is still under development. Here you will have some information about suggested documents for us to view. Underneath we have dashboards, reports, and this is it when it comes to the main screen in the application. Now let me move on to privileges. Well, I think there are two main levels of privileges in WEBCON BPS. When we have access to the presentation layer and configuration layer of the portal, and the second layer is the access to data. Access to the presentation layer of the portal are those privileges that allow us to log into the portal, go into an application, add new reports, modify reports, These privileges also allow you to view reports, but only their headlines. What it means that this access level doesn't give us access to any elements of the process. So we won't be able to see any documents, only the headlines and the reports. We will not be able to preview documents. We will not be able to modify documents. However, the second type of privilege, so that gives you access to data. And there you can see elements of the process on reports. You can preview a given element, modify it. That depends on the role that is given to you as part of those privileges. Those two levels can be compared in the previous versions to the SharePoint privileges. So if we gave somebody access to a given site, they could go and see what our SWEs. But if they do not have the privilege to see the report, then they couldn't see anything on the report, they couldn't preview documents or modify them. Once we define the two levels of privileges, let me move on to the changes that we will see in the new version. First of all, we have the so-called global privileges. So far, in the system configuration, we had just one section. We had an administrator. This person was defined in Studio and had access to all elements in all processes. They could read it, they could go into admin mode in all elements, so they could pretty much define and configure everything. Now the global privileges were divided into three sections. Number one, system administrator. Number two, business administrator. And number three, access to all workflow elements. The so-called system administrator is the role that we can give upon installation of the new version. So these are the highest possible privileges that you can have in Studio. A system admin is the only role that allows you to create a new application. A person without those privileges will not be able to create a new application. System administrator has access to Studio, can modify any application they want, any application configured in Studio. They have full access to all data sources. However, they do not have access to documents, so there is no access to data. The second type is the role of a business administrator. This role is what used to be a global administrator, so a person who has access to all documents in all processes can go into admin mode in each document and will be able to modify it as they wish. And the new role that wasn't there before, that is the access to all workflow elements. Before, when we wanted to define a person who would be able to see all elements in all processes, we had to do it. We had to add this person to all processes in the privileges in read-only mode. Now we can do it globally by adding it in configuration settings by clicking the field access to all workflow elements. And now the application privileges. It's a new section because only in the new version of the BPS we have applications as such. It is quite a huge change because in the new WEBCON 2019 version, all privileges, both to the presentation layer and the process, are defined in Studio. Before it was divided. Presentation privileges were defined in SharePoint, and privileges to access to data and configuration were defined in Studio. Application privileges have three levels. The highest level is the application administrator. Application administrator can modify applications, has access to Studio, they can add new reports, new dashboards. They do not have access to data. However, it's important to note, application administrator cannot add a new application. So if you want to make someone an application admin, but we don't want them to be a system administrator, we need to have a system administrator who will create an application, then grant application administrator privileges, and this person will be able to see the application. They will only see the applications that they were granted privileges to by the system administrator. And the Studio will open in a limited version without access to all sources, only to the public ones. So generally, it will not open in its full mode. We also have the portal designer privilege, so this person doesn't have access to Studio. They will be able to add new reports, modify reports, deleting them from the side of the portal, and this person will have no access to data. It's all about designing the application, modifying reports, but no access to data. Importantly, if we want to link a process from a different application to our new application, then the application from which we want to link the process, we need to have privileges of at least portal designer, because this will allow us to see this process at all on the list of processes we can and want to link. Then we have the third layer of privileges. These are privileges that give access to metadata. This is still under development, but just so that you know more or less what it's about. These privileges allow you to preview processes in applications, preview form types, attribute names, workflows. It doesn't give you an opportunity to create new reports. Now they are used, for example, to create docx templates via Word add-in. So we don't want a given person to have access to the portal or modify it, but we want them to be able to create new docx templates. So if we want this person to do it, they need to have access to metadata.
Now the last privilege, this is access to applications. This kind of privilege must be granted to all kinds of persons who are to see the application in the portal. If we don't add this kind of privileges, these people won't see anything, any kind of application in the list of available applications or suggested applications. If you are given a task in such an application and you have no access or no access privileges, this task will be previewed and performed only from the main site. You won't be able to see it in the list and you won't be able to access it from the list. Now, process privileges. So this is the element that has been there for some time. It hasn't been modified. We've only changed the names. These names are now easier to understand. So previously that was administration privileges, now it's business administrator, that's how we call it. So this is where you have access to all kinds of elements in the process. You can modify any kind of element. You work as an admin. Then this is modification without, you can edit, but you do not act as an admin. Then you can read, that's yet another privilege. You can preview any kind of elements, but you cannot modify them in any sort of way. Then you have privileges to add new or start new elements. These are privileges that you have to give if someone is going to start a new element by clicking on a tile. Now access to all kinds of elements without preview. So you can preview all kinds of elements without attachments. And finally, archive management. So this is a privilege that is available if the archivization option is available. That is access to archivization option. Now, let me give the floor to Marek. Now, we're going to Designer Studio. There are a few new elements. There's an app. This is a new node in which we can add processes. We can transfer processes from other applications. But one new element that is of interest is the presentation node, as part of which we can define and later modify the elements we would like to use in dashboards. This was broken down into 3 categories: starting, reports and dashboards. One very important change is that the configuration of all these elements from the presentation is kept in the content base, which means that when we export these into a new environment, we are able to transfer all these elements, such as visualization, the presentation level, to the new environment. We have now 2 start buttons defined. We've been able to see them already. Let me start with reports. We have 3 types of reports, and the configuration is pretty much the same as you know from traditional SWE, but now it's available in Designer Studio. You can modify such a report from the portal. If you have privileges to create such reports, you can define the area, the data area, which the user will be able to adjust. Once you've selected the columns that are of interest to you, you may add filters, predefined filters, sorting. You may add counted columns, and these values are pretty much the same as those in SWE. The search panel is also similar, so you can search by columns. One new thing and a huge change is the view. That is the way in which each single list can be viewed. We can define these views, we can define the columns, their sequence, but later the users can adjust the views to their needs, so that the data that are presented can be used to their best benefit. Now, speaking of reports, you can inherit these from applications, which means that if you have privileges to the applications, you also have privileges to display reports. This can be changed, however. You can define non-standard privileges for particular reports, and as you can see, you can disable these options and you can create private views. Now you can also decide that there is only one view without any private views. You can also do this. The third tab that you can see, considering that we have a lot of reports and a lot of dashboards, in the Use tab we can preview which dashboard features which report. Now there is also a possibility to place a new report in any place especially in the SharePoint site, especially in the previous version, 2017, if you migrate, you can replace old web parts with modern web parts by embedding new lists in SharePoint.
Dobrze, możemy jeszcze tutaj dodać sort,
We can also add a report here.
określić jakie jest
We can define the source of data, the columns, and once you've saved it, the report will be seen at the portal. So this is how it's going to look like.
Tak, znajdujemy się cały czas w obrębie aplikacji sekretariat.
So we're still at the application called Secretary's Office. These are our default settings, nothing really new and interesting. We're going to go through the reports that are there, so we're not going to create anything new. So speaking of lists, we have seen this several times already, but one thing that we would like to point out is that there are lots of possibilities for end users in this new version. As you go through a particular report, you may decide which columns you would like to see, what is their sequence.
Jeżeli coś nas nie interesuje,
If there's anything that is of little interest to us, we can hide these columns.
przez osobę projektującą takie zestawienie,
Now, if you're a designer, you can add columns that have been hidden.
dodatkowo możemy
You can also
włączyć w prosty sposób
turn on or turn off grouping,
kryteria grupowania
and grouping criteria
lewej strony.
are displayed to the left-hand side.
Dodatkowo
Additionally,
grupowania takich
apart from grouping criteria,
elementów, które
the number of the elements that
mają zadane warunki.
meet the criteria is displayed. Speaking of filters, there are lots of possibilities as well. Each and every user will be able to adjust the lists to their needs. To the right-hand side, there's a possibility to display the filters that are in use, or simply disable those filters that we don't need and that are there in the settings.
Możliwości.
Speaking of filters, there are lots of possibilities. We can choose particular values or search phrases or particular values as part of a particular column.
Po zastosowaniu wybranych filtrów ustawienia sobie
Once you've adjusted the filters and selected the settings for the list,
Co istotne, z każdego raportu mamy
you can also
podejrzenia bez konieczności wchodzenia w
preview the report without going to a particular element. You can preview the data,
znaczny sposób skróci to
and this is going to shorten the time that users need to deal with the themes listed in such documents. As you work in preview mode, there is a compact
kompaktowej prezentacji
presentation mode available,
w trybie pełnej
but you can also use a full screen mode, such as the one you can see in the screen at the moment. The form, this is its new presentation,
procesu.
but you can adjust it to the process you use. You can also use new, old presentation modes.
Widoki publiczne i
Public and private views. Now, as you go through such a report,
wszystkich filtrów
once you've set all the filters, grouping, sorting, etc.,
bardziej dokładnie.
your report is going to be much more precise and accurate. You can change your configuration, you can modify it. This is very important to many of our users. A given view may be saved as public if you have suitable privileges, but if you don't, then you may define such a view as private view for your own use. One possible scenario in this respect is that you create a private view, then you check how it works, if it's fine, and then you may make it public and grant access to other users. The list of views that have been developed as part of a particular list may be previewed through configuration. So these are global views, private views. You may add or remove these. These views may be presented in two modes. That is, they might be presented as tables or charts. Any of these views may be embedded in dashboards. Dashboards, this is yet another feature in our system which may be compared to SharePoint portals which we developed for particular groups of users. One fine example in this respect is a dashboard that is designed for someone who runs the reception desk. So there is a task counter, a table report, charts such as the bar charts to the right. These dashboards may provide the elements that a particular group of users need. As you can see, this is for someone who has more advanced privileges, someone who runs the reception desk. But you may just as well develop a report for a regular employee. We may add a new element in the system. This is for people who have designer privileges. You choose the dashboard. You can call it an employee. And it's up to you which sections to use, which sections to move, which sections to add, what sequence to choose. Almost any idea may be put to use based on the tool, using the tools we offer. We may add several elements such as images, such as defined reports, such as start buttons, the ones we have developed before. We may embed text, we may embed a code, we may embed a task counter. So let me add a report now, or a particular view as part of a particular report. If there are more views, we can choose the view that we would like to save in the dashboard. So let me add the registration report. We may add one more section here. Let me add the task counter, the start button, the two buttons that we added previously. The dashboard elements may be changed in sequence, so we may juggle these, and they're intended to serve a particular group of users, and they obviously will be adjusted to their needs. Speaking of privileges, we may define who is going to see the dashboard, so we may define dashboards for different roles in the system. So again, the interpreters cannot interpret the questions because the speaker doesn't speak to the mic. Dashboards are created by designers or people who have administrator privileges. However, the views in the dashboards may be created by the users. But dashboards are created by administrators or designers. So by way of conclusion, we would like to point out the major changes brought to you by the new version of WEBCON BPS 2019, which are going to make your work easier and faster. One such element is the interface, the user interface. It's standardized. The applications are standardized now. There are regular sections, permanent sections in each. Every new application is going to look the same, which means that it will less time to get used to these applications. Usually, as we implemented new processes, these applications differed, their interfaces differed in the past, which was confusing to the users. Now this is going to change. The new version, there is a standard view for all the applications, standard sections, so there should be no problem navigating the portal in a new version. Yet another element is the new view for the form. Hopefully you're going to like it. And again, just as Marek has said, the new portal gives you a possibility to display the form in a SharePoint version or in a modern version. We're talking about the modern version here. The form has been changed in layout. There are new views in dictionaries. And this is going to be easier to use and easier to navigate. The panel with information on the document has been moved from left-hand side to the right-hand side. And you can also hide it, which wasn't possible before. This is just a list of people. So this particular list, this particular dictionary works slightly different, in a slightly different way. There is one more interesting option. Speaking of the user interface, of course, is the new set of colors. You can change the color according to your needs. Every person may change the color. When you enter the settings, you can choose themes and you can choose the color according to your liking. Now it's white available, but also default settings, and we're going to develop in this bit in the future. At this point in time, this setting defines the entire portal. These colors are available for start buttons and tiles, and you can change them according to your liking. Now the navigation, something that is important to end users, you can do phrase search. The search engine is a completely new one. It has been reconfigured. You can search from the main site. You can search a particular phrase. You can also search through metadata, that is names of the processes, attributes, applications reports, and you may also search through the values of the particular documents used in processes, that is the values entered by particular users in particular attributes.
Ten lewy pan
The left-hand side panel is also a good option where we can filter it depending on what we're looking for, what kind of document we're looking for, and then we can filter it and see only those dashboards we were looking for. Search from the point of view of the application has an extra option. There is a tab called In Application. So by default, if we're searching for something from the application side, at the beginning we will get results searched in the given application, but we can move to the tab that says Everywhere or in Navigation and then see more results. Another new thing is the application search engine. In SharePoint we had links to sites. On the left hand side we were able to have extra links that could be added to process sites, but it was not possible to search for a process or a group of processes. In the new version, if you want to select an application, we can start writing its name. We get the suggested names underneath. Another new thing is the latest activity register in the portal, so the system is collecting information on what a given user visits, what applications they visit most often, and based on that there is a list called Suggested Applications, and they're on the main side of the portal. So myself and Marek, you could see that we used 5 applications most frequently, and you can go from the main site straight into those applications. And the same suggested views are given once you click on an application, and suggested views give you links to the most frequently visited dashboards and reports, and also specific views, both private and public views within those reports. The third group of improvements offered by the new version of BPS is the customization or personalization in terms of adjusting and customizing your views. We already talked about views, but there is one more thing that is worth mentioning, and that is adding to favorites. Each user sees this top bar wherever they are. The top bar is there, and you can basically add certain places within the system to your favorites. To favorites you can add either document start, it could be a view, it could be an application, and those favorites can be accessed everywhere regardless of where we are. I think that for users it could be a huge improvement, so that they don't have to click into the same places. They can have it all in favorites on the right hand side in the top right corner. The entire group that we called user experience is a series of improvements that will improve your interaction with the system. So for example, if you were in a specific application, on the bottom we have the list of our recent activity, and there is a possibility to click into the document that we have recently changed, modified, approved, I think it will make it much easier for the users to look for a certain document. We don't have to search for the document in the search box. Also, we can view the latest activity within the application. These are activities that are yours or your subordinates, and all of them. So you can monitor everything that's happening within the application. This will be a huge change and huge improvement for the users. You don't have to go into each element. It is enough to see a preview, look at the list. So this is something that will allow you to flag tasks or prioritize them. You can save this view and come back to it whenever you need. New document history. This feature has been redone as well to make it more transparent and to present the information we look for in a clear manner. So who modified it last? Here it is in a graphic form. You see the entire process and history of changes. It shows us who was the last user who went through the path and what path it was. If there are more iterations within one step, they are aggregated so that the history doesn't take too long, so it's much easier to read it. And the quick paths or mass quick paths. This is a feature that was present in the previous versions, but I think now it was improved and it was made much more intuitive. I have saved a view, and the only thing that you need is to approve documents. I can tick all of them in the view, or I can select some of them, and if we have the quick path set in Designer as a quick path, then just with one click I can move all those elements along it. And let me just say that this quick path wouldn't be here if those documents were in different steps. That might have been the problem in previous tasks where you had active tasks and those massive approval was possible only for documents within one step. Now it is sort of you're prompted, and only those documents that are in the same step can be ticked using the quick path. Here we have the preview of attachments. Also, there are extra options here. So first of all, the documents are added as attachments. We can also very easily preview them, and that includes Word documents, Excel files, or email conversations. I think it will be an improvement for many of you. You don't have to open the file in an external software, you can just preview it within the form. So this is the end of our presentation. I hope that all those functionalities that are present in the new version will make your life easier and will make your interaction with documents in BPS even more pleasant. And we hope that all those elements will be useful and you will use them very willingly. Thank you so much for your attention.
Mają Państwo jakieś pytania?
Do you have any questions? Yes, in the new reports, in the old SWE, we had the Export to Excel button. Is it here in the new version as well? Well, at this point, I don't think the button is there, but I'm sure it will be included because we want to make sure that all the functionalities that were in the old version to be present in the new one, but I think at this point, this button is not there. I have a question about administration. The application administrator, do they have a privilege to create new processes or modify the old ones? Application administrator, you mean? Yes. Yes, they have such privileges, but within the application that they administrate. So they can't create processes within applications they're not admin of, and they are not able to link processes from applications for whose they're not administrator or portal designer. So they can do all that within the application they are administrator of. They can add process, modify it, but if we want to grant administration admin privileges to somebody, it is just for the system administrator to create an application, grant application admin privileges, and then the person within this application can do anything. The person who has application administrator privileges. Any other questions?
Thank you for
the microphone helps a lot for the non-Polish people to understand everything possible. I do have a question regarding the system requirements. Do they follow the same system requirements for installing WEBCON as we do have before with the SharePoint web front-end requirements, or do they follow different specifications due to the reason that there is a lot and a huge improvement by introducing the portal and also the search engine based on Lucene and so on?
And do you mean the infrastructure requirements?
Yeah.
I believe that Pavel will be the best person to answer this question. To be honest, I'm not sure about it, so I don't want to confuse you.
I will ask the running Wikipedia. Thank you.
Pierwsze pytanie.
The first question is, do you keep the privileges for each document type? Because you said that there is application admin, global admin. Do you also have document admin privileges? Yes, this function is still there. We just added privileges related to applications because application is a new system element. The remaining privileges remain the same. Okay, one more question then. So the difference between application and process, because you said that within an application we can create an application or change application. However, the application is a new node that was created above processes, and as one application we can have several processes, and underneath we can have different workflows. Yes, so application is on the top because your processes are more and more complex. That's why an application connects several linked processes, because the system rarely consists of a single process. Usually there are more. They are getting more and more complex. So an application connects several processes. As part of one process, you can have many workflows and many document types. Thank you. I have a question about licenses for designer. If I have one license for designer, for somebody to log in and configure, if I give privileges of application administrator, do they need a new license? Will you need to buy a new license for them? This hasn't changed. The access to Studio requires a license from for example, a portal designer can change the presentation layer, so application administrator is the same person who was developing processes. So in this respect, it hasn't changed. But from the side of the portal, you can change reports, dashboards, etc. Thank you. I understand that dashboards allow us to see elements from different content databases or just from a single database. Because Łukasz Wróbel mentioned something. You mean... So I can imagine we have several counters, and each counter shows the elements that we need to process on a separate content database. But remember that an application shows only data from processes that are configured within the application or linked with this application. So a dashboard can be created only based on the processes that are present within an application. So we need to link them in Studio beforehand. I think maybe Marek will show you. I'll just repeat the question so that the interpreters can translate it. How to link a process created in a different application to another one, to another application. We have a green icon, and the process that was configured directly in the application has a blue icon. I have a question. So, about do you have a new version counterpart of the so-called substitutions? Yes, we do have them, and they work exactly the same way as the old system. We just define them in a different way, so replacements or substitutions. Thank you. I have a question about the structure, subordinate structure. So the view, such as latest activity, but from the point of view of the superior, is it still possible to turn it on in each view? So for example, I have my active tasks, and the superior could check all the tasks of their subordinates on the panel, not in the latest activity section, but as part of reports. Because in SharePoint, each web part could be added as a subordinate structure, and the superior could filter it easily. I think that at this point it has not been configured yet, but I think it will be, because it was a frequently used option in the previous versions of the system. I also have a question. So far, in Studio you could define what happens after you follow a path where you're going to end up. What are the options in the portal? After I complete a task on the form, can I end up on the main web page or the main application page? Can I define this? This functionality hasn't changed, in my opinion, because the process definition is exactly the same. After you follow a path, I think we'll be just moved to the same place where we started. So where we clicked on that document, most likely it will be the same application we clicked from. But if we entered this document from the search, then probably we'll go back to the search. One more thing, system administrator is the highest possible privilege group, right? And we also have access to document privilege, because I understand that system administrator doesn't have access to data. That is correct. But it is the system administrator who grants access to documents. So in extreme cases, they can grant it to themselves. Well, yes, but at the beginning we have the system administrator, the person who installs the new system. So we only have the system administrator privileges. They can do anything in Studio, including granting privileges to all applications and also access to documents. So one more question then. In the new portal, do you have the counterpart of those KPIs and permanent web parts? Old web parts? No, we have new web parts. Do you have counterparts of the old web parts? The one that would show the system status and KPIs. What do you mean old web parts? So web parts, status system and KPI. In the system status we had licenses, service, and KPIs showed how much time everyone spent in a given point. Now there are no such web parts. We can only add reports and dashboards within the application. Like we said, with Marek, this portal will be developed, so I think that those functionalities will be added. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, then thank you very much for your attention again.